Cikgu.
Hey, all right, great, great. Let me just stop sharing for a while. Let me test one more thing while we're waiting. Amida, Dean can see my screen? Yeah. Can you hear the sound properly?
Yes.
As we go.
Yes, Patrick. Excellent, thank you. I'm going to test that. Brilliant.
Okay, the time is 3:30 now. Shall we start the session?
Sounds like a plan. Hold on, let me just. Okay.
Okay, before that, can we? Okay, I will give a brief introduction about Mr. Patrick.
Okay.
Okay, shall I? Okay, first of all, good afternoon to the ladies and gentlemen whoever attend this session. I'd like to welcome today's mini class is Leadership and Mike's Crisis. So, Mr. Patrick is an implementation specialist and consultant. He brings more than 25 years of working experience, of which almost 20 years has been in sales-related positions. Having started his career with the British IT conglomerate International Computers, ILC, in 1988, he has held positions in sales lead, country manager, and chief executive officer. Having worked with the team, direct and indirect sales, he also have a specializing in area of salesing, coaching, and mentoring. He has had success in delivering business growth for both in local and international corporations. So besides, in today's world, all the business success is interim. If you are a leader, the only competitive advantage you can leverage on is create an enduring successful innovation culture. When leaders successfully lead themselves, they team to adopt and embrace change, sustain, and leveraging the performance, your business will rise and rest. Mr. Patrick will share about the 7 highly effective practices that will propel your company to lasting success by enhancing the potential of your people. We believe at the end of the session, all the participants will able to practice these highly practices can implement in your business and daily life. So now let's put our hands together. Welcome, Mr. Patrick, for sharing this session.
Thank you very much, Naga, for that kind introduction. I feel humble. Thank you so much. I also, by all that, makes me feel really old. Also, thank you very much, Naga. I really appreciate that. Okay, welcome everybody. I'm so glad to see so many of you all here. How is everybody doing? I hope everybody is doing well. I see all the reactions coming up, all the creative reactions coming up. And yes, as Naga said, I will try to share some insights. Okay. Around this leading amidst crisis. My first disclaimer is I am just the messenger, and I would love to say that I'm the guru here, but I'm not. And you will see in my slides, I'm just the messenger on behalf of many gurus, many gurus, many thought leaders. So I'm just putting it together to share with you some of their insights, and it is my real honest and humble opinion that some of their thoughts and insights are really valuable, or at least we think so, from the leadership resources and Franklin Covey. And I put that together to share that with you, and I'm hoping this hour together would be would help you with some insights in especially in this very challenging times. Okay, so if with your permission, let me just pull up my slide deck and let's see if it all comes up okay. Uh, can you all see my deck? All good? Yes? Right. Okay, great. So with that, this is me, by the way. This is my credentials, my contact. Feel free, to reach out to me. As we go along, I just want to introduce. Naga did a great job in introducing me. I would like to introduce two of my, I call them partners in crime. I've got Hamida Ibrahim and what do you call this? And Izuddin here, who are also from Leadership Resources. Hamida, Izuddin, you want to say hi and and identify yourselves?
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, just to say hi. Nice to see all of you here. Welcome.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you, Hamida. Izuddin?
Hi everyone. Izuddin here. Welcome to the session. I hope you find this session beneficial and fruitful. Yeah, Patrick is a wonderful facilitator and trainer.
They're all just very nice people. They are too nice, actually. What do you call this? And really, folks, like I said, I got the easy job of just delivering all the stuff that people have put together. People like Izuddin and Hamida have done all the real hard work with Naga and the whole team to put this together. Okay. So with that, folks, let me just quickly take you through some ideas and thoughts around this whole concept of leadership amidst a crisis. Okay. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. This whole idea of leadership amidst a crisis. And as I go through this session, folks, when I say crisis, I think I will use it interchangeably with the word change, with the word change. We're all going through change. I think if I were to ask here how many of us are going through change, I think everybody will put up their hands. So crisis, change, all coming at the same time. And we're going to talk about, hey, what are some ideas, some thoughts that can help perhaps during this time? So by way of agenda, we'll talk a little bit about that, the leadership amidst crisis. We will talk about how culture plays a role in this, and then I will talk about this whole idea of a case for culture and what are some of the areas. And Naga mentioned the 7 areas. We will talk around creating a culture of in 7 different areas that we believe can and will help you in leadership during this challenging times. And then we'll also talk a little bit about the how. How do we, at least we, from our perspective, from Franklin Covey and Leadership Resources perspective, how do we address some of these challenges, or at least in this new times? Okay, so if everybody is okay, we'll do that, and we'll end. At the end, feel free to ask any questions. By the way, while I'm speaking, if you have any questions that you want to bring up, feel free to stop me anytime and ask. Yeah, I don't profess to be able to answer everything, but happy to take anything and have a discussion around it. Okay, so if everybody's okay, let's crack on. Now, I already mentioned earlier, I'm just the messenger. No way am I the guru. You will see I will be talking about things from these thought leaders, different thought leaders, and these are just some of them, by the way. Real industry heavyweights. People who have been in, professors at Harvard, people who have written best-selling books. I'll be curating stuff that they have put together to hopefully address what we call this leadership during these challenging times. Now, a little bit about Franklin Covey, in case you don't know about us. Franklin Covey is a global company, and they focus on this whole idea of human behavior or change. Okay, they're a global company, over 100 offices around the world in over 160 countries. They have got in excess of 150,000 certified facilitators around the world. Okay, and facilitators from our side as well as from the client's side. Okay, and who are we? Myself, Izuddin and Hamida are from a company called Leadership Resources, and we are the partner to Franklin Covey. We've been the partner to Franklin Covey for close to 30 years now. So for Malaysia and Brunei, Leadership Resources is really synonymous with Franklin Covey. So when I say Franklin Covey in this area, it's actually Leadership Resources. Yeah. So that's a little bit by way of introduction of who we are. Now, moving along. Can I just ask you folks, okay, don't worry, I won't make you do too much work today. It won't be much work, but just as we go along, since this is it's a 1-hour talk, so I won't be, getting you to do too much exercises, but I would ask you to think along sometimes, okay, to, hey, just points to ponder. Think about a great organization, for example. Just take a minute and think of a organization that you think is great. It might even be your current organization. It might be another organization that you admire. Think about that organization and think about what makes them so remarkable. What makes them so remarkable? So as you think about them, I don't know, maybe some of these names may come up, may or may not. It might be some of these names, it might be some other names, but remarkable organizations that are doing well. And the question is, what makes them so great? What makes them different, perhaps? And we believe what they do have in common, all of them at least, this thing called a winning culture. What makes them different, what makes them powerful is this idea of a winning culture, which interestingly enough may not be so easy to replicate. May not be so easy to replicate. And a culture that is sustainable, and a culture that gives them that competitive edge, Okay, and we'll talk a little bit later about about the things that you can perhaps copy from other companies and what perhaps is a little bit difficult to copy. Okay, but if you think about those companies that you had in mind, and I'm sure you'd be thinking, hey, yes, the company that I had in mind, it's that culture that is different. How we say, hey, that company has a great culture and perhaps that company has a not so great culture. It's that winning culture, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today.
Okay now.
Sorry, somebody had a question, I thought. Or maybe that's just an outside person. No problem. I thought somebody had a question. This idea of a winning culture, and we're going to talk about the areas, these 7 odd areas that helps define what we think are winning cultures. Okay. Now, this was the quote I talked about. This comes from our chairman. Interestingly enough, this quote, he said it, and there are many other. I've heard this from some of our clients. I know a CEO of one of our clients in Sweden has said almost the same thing. And I just want you to think about this. Do you all buy into this? How many of you all just show me a reaction by raise of hands, through your reaction button. How many of you all agree with this statement? You can copy a lot of things, right? We talk about technology. A company comes up with new technology today. It doesn't take long before somebody else copies it, right? That's not difficult to copy, right? Anything. But what is a little bit more difficult to copy is the culture, okay? The way things are done. Would you all agree with that? How many of you all, by show of hands, would agree with this statement? Yes, no? Yes, yes, okay, I see. Yes, absolutely right. I see thumbs. Thank you very much for that. Yes, isn't it true? Things can be copied. A lot can be copied, but some things that are a little bit difficult to copy is the effectiveness of your people in the organization, how you build that effectiveness and the culture around that. So really, that's why we say culture at the end of the day is really what we say the ultimate competitive advantage, if you think about it. And if I were to borrow from the all famous Peter Drucker, everybody knows him, this famous guru of management, Peter Drucker, he's used this often, repeated quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Strategy is important, very important in life. A strategy is very, very important. But really, among the two, he says culture eats strategy for breakfast, because you can have the best strategy, but if your culture is bad in the organization, executing on that strategy is going to be hard. So really, it's culture first before you even think about strategy. So this famous saying of Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what is the number one challenge? The number one challenge, like Deloitte in their Human Capital Trends report says this, culture issues exploded to the scene. It has become the number one challenge of companies face around the world. Around the world, this has become the number one global challenge that companies face around the world. Okay, so what really is culture? If we talk about culture, what is it? What really is culture? If you were to break it down, culture is really nothing more than the spoken, unspoken values, the norms, and the systems of a company or even a group of people. It is the nature of the relationships. And last but not least, it is the collective behavior of your people. Do you all agree? In fact, I had one client who used to sum it up by saying, this is the way things are done around here. Think about it. Isn't that true? That's what culture is. This is the way things are done around here. And if you have a good culture, things move fast, move smoothly. It's all well-oiled, greased. And when the culture is perhaps a tad dysfunctional, then it's different. Thank you very much. I see people agree with what is said up there. Isn't it true? Absolutely true. So culture is this, and so if culture is the number one challenge, why is it that some people are faced with difficulties in this? Why are few companies making any progress in addressing it? Now, one of the reasons is there's too many organizations leave building their culture to chance. Think about it, isn't that true? They focus on a lot of things, and a lot of it technical, but they leave culture to chance. And that's where the the problem lies. And we believe that great cultures can and are designed intentionally. In fact, the company that I asked you to think about at the beginning of this talk, which company that you admire, that you think is well, or then some of those names that I put up there, you can bet your bottom dollar that each and every one of them design their cultures intentionally. Okay, it's not left up to chance. Okay, so the question is, how do we build a winning culture, and what are the areas perhaps that we want to pay attention to build this winning culture, especially in these times of change, amidst change, or what we call a crisis. Now, it starts with this. Now, many of you all who have worked this will know this, so I won't make you do this, but I'll just talk you through this. Now, it starts with this thing called a framework. Now, if I ask you to look at those numbers, and you may be thinking, oh, and if I ask you to spot number 1 and start working your way up, by the way, the lowest number is number 1 and the highest number is 54. But if I were to ask you to start looking at number 1, then locate number 2, then locate number 3, and keep going, I bet most of you are thinking, well, this is, why is Patrick making me do this, this such hard work on a Wednesday afternoon after lunch, right? This confusing thing, and your eyes are going all over. I don't know whether some of y'all are already doing it. No? You start doing that. Now, it's tough, I agree. And if I give you a minute, when we do this exercise in workshops, most people get up to, you're lucky if you get up to 10, 11, 12, 15, around that, because it's difficult, right? And it does look like it's chaos and it's all jumbled up. Okay, now the whole idea why I start with this is because building culture starts with having a framework. What if I tell you here there is a framework? Believe it or not, those jumbled up numbers, what seemed like jumbled up, actually behind the scene there is a framework. So if I superimpose these grids from 1 to 9 over those numbers, and I tell you that there is a sequence, if you look for number 1, it is in grid number 1, number 2 is in grid number 2, and 3, and so forth. And if you keep going up to 9, 10 would be back up here, 11 would be here. If I now tell you the framework, suddenly you see, hey, hang on, a different way of looking at things. Perhaps it's not so difficult. Now, if I give you 1 minute to get from number 1, I'm sure very many of you will go a lot higher. You might even get up to 54. See the difference, folks? What seems like chaotic, actually, if you put a framework on top, it can be easy. Now, we use this simple little analogy and this little exercise to emphasize the fact that to start building a culture, you've got to have some kind of framework. You got to work with a framework that can be used and replicated. That's the first thing about building a culture. Okay. Now, if I were to see the same picture I gave you earlier and tell you to go from number 1 onwards, like I said, in 1 minute, many of you would hit, much higher, maybe even up to number 54. That's the power of having what we call a framework. Okay. So winning cultures rather, are designed intentionally. They have frameworks. They do have frameworks. They have what we call common language. And above all, they must be leader-led. Okay, cultures, you cannot leave them to chance. You can't expect a group of individuals to come up with a winning culture, especially in times like this where it's crisis or changes or challenges going on, and expect winning cultures to emerge. We can't. It has to be leader-led. You have to have a common language framework, and it has to be designed. Now, what might a winning culture look like? At Franklin Covey, we believe these are some of the areas where individuals start building up a winning culture. Number 1 is a distinctive contribution. We have engaged employees. We have what we call loyal customers and sustained performance. Okay. And that culture is translated to be affected by what we call effective individuals. Okay, first and foremost, the individuals in the organizations need to be effective, and I'll talk about 2 sets of individuals. We'll talk about the individual contributor individuals first. Okay, and if I were to borrow a quote from Stephen Covey, who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he says everything starts with the individual, because all meaningful change comes from inside out. Any systemic organizational change cannot happen without individual behavior, which leads me, that's the case for culture, which leads me to my first area of what do you call this, of key in leading amidst a crisis, which is creating a culture of what we call effectiveness. Now, if you were to put up a bunch of, these are just some of the practices, or some of the, what do you call this, the core competencies a typical individual needs to have to do well, as to be an effective individual. Let's look at this and let's see how we build that. Okay. Now, Again, if I were to ask you this question, I'm sure everybody, how many of you will put up your hand? We live in a time of unprecedented change. How many of you all agree with this statement? We live in time of unprecedented change. Just see what has happened to us in the last 2 years, okay? Unprecedented, right? And what kind of changes are you experiencing in your organization? I'm sure all of you are, bar none. I think everybody, if I would ask this question about people around the globe, everybody would say some kind of change you're experiencing in the organization. Very, very slim chance you're not. So we are going through this change. And like I said, I use the word changes and crisis interchangeably, okay? So some people call it a crisis, some people call it changes, but it is happening for sure, okay? And now the question then begs is, how do we build a culture of effective individuals who have the capacity to adapt to that change? Okay, so as we go along, as I talk about building what do you call this, effective individuals, or individuals who are effective in their ability to address change, I want you to think about something that you would like to change, either personally or professionally, either at work or what do you call this, in your personal life, to be more effective. What is it? What would that impact be? Think about why you haven't changed it now. What is stopping you from changing it? Something that you would like to change, And along that line, I would like to share with you, if you think about that situation in your life, this famous model, I don't know if you've heard of the model called Kurt Lewin's force field analysis. It's a very popular model. It talks about forces of change. And when we want to effect change, there are what we call the driving forces that drive change. And typically they could be, what is the current state and what would we like it to be? So we want to, that change that I asked you to think about just now, okay, this is the current state and what would I like it to be? And that's what we want to be. That's the easy part. Now, why does change not always happen? Because according to Kurt Lewin, there are always restraining forces. And tell me, you think about your own situation. Could it be what's restraining is fears and anxieties? Could it be that? Could it be old habits? Now, those are individual things that you are thinking. I won't ask you to share it, but think about it yourself. But think about it. The same thing applies to a group of people. The same thing applies to organizations, to teams, to unions, to divisions, We want to change, right? There's a driving force to change, but there's always restraining forces of fears, anxieties, and old habits. Now, two ways we can effect change, okay? What we call the outside in. The outside in is we change a system or we change compliances. That is from the outside. We change what governs the system, okay? The system or the compliances. But if we want true engagement, if we really want engagement to last, true engagement comes from called inside out. Inside out, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
And that is by choice. When people make their own choice to change,
Masuk Patrick punya dulu.
drive engagement. Sorry, was there a question there, or was I hearing outside sound? Okay. Inside out. That's where true engagement comes from, right? Okay. Sorry, let me just change this a little bit. Okay, good. And we talk about levels of engagement. And some of you may be familiar with this different levels of engagement. Now that line, that green line that you see below the line, we talk about things like people who they comply indifferently. You may be familiar with some of these people. You may have worked with some of these people. They work, but they are it's just indifferent compliance. They just do the work, but they're very indifferent. If you go further down, it could be even worse. They could be obedient, but very resentful. And of course, the absolute worst is they're at the bottom the barrel. They're either ready to quit or they are constantly rebelling. Some of you may recognize these terms. You may have worked with people like this. But if you're going to go up at the level of engagement, we have willing cooperation, we have heartfelt commitment, and creative excitement. So the question is, when we talk about effective individuals, how do we drive that engagement as high as possible, hopefully towards what we call creative excitement? Okay, how do we change behavior from the inside out? Okay, so there are three levers, so to speak, three things that we can push or change to get from the inside. Number one is a compelling why. When people have a compelling why, when we help them understand why the things that they do are important. Two is when the leader models it. Okay, so it's very important that the leader models the behavior that we want effective individuals to exhibit. And last but not least is about new habits, changing habits. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, and I think you recognize this gentleman, Stephen Covey, who wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He has this to say. He says there's only 3 constants in life. One is change. Change is constant. We have a choice. That's the other thing that's constant. We always have a choice. Again, I don't know how many of you will agree, but in life, everybody has a choice. We always have a choice, right? And the third one is the principles that underline things. That doesn't change. That's a constant. These are the 3 things that are constant. Okay, the principles that underline things. Okay, and then he talks about things like paradigms, mental maps. So when we talk about effective individuals, how do we help people look at things differently, see things differently with this thing called paradigms? And he says, if you want big changes, if you want effective individuals, help them see things different, make changes to their paradigms, not just the behaviors, how they see things. Because when you see things differently, you do things differently, and you get different results. So how do we go about changing our paradigms? I just mentioned this model that we have. We talk about the see, do, get model. And with the paradigm is how you see things. Start with what are the things that you do differently, and what perhaps are the results that you get. Okay, and we use a model, like I say, framework. Speaking of frameworks, we use this framework for effective individuals called the maturity continuum, and of course it's modeled after the 7 habits. And you have habits 1, 2, and 3 that constitutes the private victory for an individual. Habits 4, 5, and 6 constitutes what we call the public victory. And with this, and of course habit 7, sharpening the saw, that helps people become effective. So this is the basis of how do we get people to be what we call effective in this maturity continuum. Okay, and and you may be thinking this, and you see this, some of the things that I'm talking about, you say, hey, Patrick, this is fairly common sense, and we agree, we 100% agree. A lot of this is common sense. Unfortunately, one of Stephen's favorite quotes is, common sense is not necessarily common practice. Again, how many of y'all would agree with that statement? Common sense is not necessarily common practice, right? So that's why frameworks help. When you have a common language, you have a common framework, that can help, And you know what? Not being common practice, you might recognize some of this. Now, the opposite of the maturity continuum, the immaturity continuum, a bit of a joke perhaps, but it can be something like this. And as we put that up, you say, oh, this looks really bad, this looks so depressing, but I bet some of us, and I know I can, you might be able to relate to some of these things. Maybe not to the max, but in certain ways, we talk about being a victim. We talk about, minimizing things. We talk about win-lose. I must win, and somebody must lose. We talk about putting urgent things first. All this can be what we call the immaturity continuum. And if we don't, and we leave it unchecked in organizations, many individuals will gravitate towards, or they may gravitate towards this. So that is why frameworks are important, to help individuals, leader-led, help individuals to move towards what we call being effective. Okay, so think about this, in your own organization, your own teams, what does dependency look like? What systems or practices might be creating this dependency? So ask yourself, think about it, as you try and navigate these challenging and times along crises. Ask yourselves what dependency might look in your organization, and perhaps map it with what a more effective model might be. Okay, so if I just were to take one part about this model, and talking about being proactive, and if I just can share this, we talk about this idea, and effective individuals we talk about them focusing on things that they can do rather than things that they can't do. Okay, so during a crisis, our biggest obstacles and fears could be old habits. So we need to focus, we need to help our people, if we are leaders, focus on things that they can do something about, as opposed to focusing on things they can't do. And we talk about these 2 circles called the circle of influence and the circle of concern. Okay, the circle of influence and the circle of concern. What are they? What is the circle of influence? What is the circle of concern? Let me share a video that will talk a little bit about that in support of what we say, building effective individuals. Okay, so let me just share this video called the circle of influence with you.
As we go about our lives, we operate in 2 circles. The first is our circle of concern. These are things that we care about, or may even affect us, but over which we have little or no control. The second is our circle of influence. These are things which we can control or influence. When people are reactive, they focus on the outer circle. They spend time and energy on things that they really can do nothing about. As a result, their circle of influence shrinks. When people are proactive, they focus on their inner circle of influence, where their efforts will make a positive difference in relationships and results. As a result, their circle of influence grows. Listen as Stephen shares an experience where one man increased his effectiveness by focusing on his inner circle of influence.
This principle worked powerfully for one executive. His boss was creative, talented, capable, and brilliant, and everyone knew it. But he had a very dictatorial style of management.
Now, so you take this, put it in my office. But with Insight Plus, we plan to add 8 new features. No. Adding, no. Reducing. Take a seat.
The net effect was that he alienated almost the entire executive team surrounding him.
It's vital that we push a simpler device.
But one of the executives was proactive. He took the initiative, he anticipated, he empathized. This man focused on his own circle of influence.
He reversed my strategy right in front of my team.
He did the same on Claire's meeting last Friday.
That's it.
He read the situation.
You know, really,
He was not blind to the president's weaknesses. Instead of criticizing them, he would compensate for them. He read with empathy the president's underlying concern.
Simplify for success.
Where the president was weak in his style, he tried to buffer his own people and make such weaknesses irrelevant. And he'd worked with the president's strengths, his vision, talent, creativity. He anticipated the president's need.
Guys, I really need those reports for the meeting at 3 o'clock.
So when he presented information,
I have this for you.
he also gave his analysis and his recommendations based on that analysis.
So, my idea was...
Little by little, his circle of influence continued to expand to the extent that eventually no one made any significant moves in the organization without that man's involvement and approval, including the president. The president did not feel threatened because this man's strength complemented his strength and compensated for his weaknesses. So he had the strength of 2 people, a complementary team.
For example, I did discover that,
This man's success was not dependent on his circumstances. It was his chosen response to those circumstances, his focus on his circle of influence, that made all of the difference.
Okay, my friends, just wanted to share that quick video, and that I think that video embodies what we talk about in terms of effective individuals. You have a choice, and I like the words that Stephen used, his chosen response. So effective individuals make the right choice. Okay, so as we leave this topic, I encourage you to think about a challenging situation that you might be facing, and what is it in your circle of influence? What can you do about it? What is your chosen response? Or do we spend time more in our circle of concern? Okay, so that's talking about effective individuals, and individuals actually make up of 2 parts. One is the individual contributor, and the other one, of course, is the leaders, in part of this winning culture, great leaders. So in terms of leaders, you talk about, again, about culture. Ram Charan, another popular business leader and writer and consultant, talks about the whole idea of a culture of organization is simply the collective behavior of its leaders. Powerful statement, especially if you're a leader, think about, because your behavior dictates the culture. Okay, and in Franklin Covey's view, great leadership can be learned. It can be learned. It's not something that you're born with. It can be learned. And great leaders differentiate themselves in these 4 key areas: the results they get, what they do, how they think, and who they are. These 4 key areas. This is how great leaders differentiate themselves. Okay, and these are things, some of the skills and the practices that we believe great leaders need to have, need to pick up. Okay, to be able to be effective leaders. Okay, an effective individual as a leader. Okay, so that's the culture and what we call the effective individuals. And then, of course, putting it together, we talk about organizational focus and execution, which I'll talk a lot in a bit. So that's the first part, my friends. The second part is creating a culture of trust. Okay, the second part about leadership amidst a crisis is this whole culture of trust, the second key area. Okay, and again, some of the thoughts here come from this thought leader, Stephen M.R. Covey, Stephen Covey's eldest son, who wrote this phenomenal book of Speed of Trust, and talking about trust. Now, if I would ask you about these two organizations, okay, which one would you work for? Company A, B, or C, or ABC or XYZ? Okay, so company ABC has got this kind of behavior. People manipulate, they distort, they spin the truth, they withhold. I mean, it's not a trick question, but you can tell already what kind of organization this is. Okay, they make excuses, they violate expectations. That's that kind of organization. Then you've got another organization, XYZ, that has got these kind of behaviors. Okay, so if I would ask you which company you would like to work for, I think it won't be too much of a stretch of an imagination to say that most of us will want to work in XYZ rather than ABC. Okay, but looking at that, the question we have to ask ourselves, a moment of ponder, is to ask yourself, in your own organization, how much of time, the percentage of time that is spent on real work, how much time is spent on real employee engagement, collaboration, and customer experience? And whatever the answer to that question is, ask yourself why. Why is it at that amount and maybe perhaps not higher? That's the question that's the challenge that we have to ask ourselves. Okay. And this gentleman called Arthur W. Jones, another popular writer, says this: all organizations are perfectly aligned to get the results they get. So whatever results you are getting, we are getting, is really because of the alignment that we currently have. And really the hidden variable is trust. We feel the hidden variable there is trust. And trust can be viewed as this. If you look at the sea, for example, nice, wonderful sea on top, right? But interestingly enough, many of us don't know that, what we see on top is just 10%, but what happens below can be as calm as this, the 90% below. It can be like this, or it can be like this. It could be like this. Okay, so the top part we see just now, like the earlier video, but bottom 90% can be like that, or it can be like this. And what differentiates the first or the second part really is this whole idea of trust. So when you have an organization that is low on trust, this is the kind of undercurrents that you have. Okay, so we want to move from that to perhaps this, where the undercurrents are also what it's like on top. Okay, so the two types of organ. So this is the whole idea of trust. And the case for trust is this: when trust is low, speed goes down and cost goes up. And we pay what we call a trust tax. Just like taxes that we pay, we end up paying a tax. Okay. And the opposite happens when trust is high. When trust is high, speed goes up. Speed in the organization goes up and cost comes down. Okay. And we get what we call a dividend, a trust dividend. So we reap the benefits of a dividend when trust is high. Okay. And these are the two basically simple formulas that we talk about in terms of trust. Okay? So we really want to ensure that trust is up in the organization. Okay, and if you want to talk about examples, these are some examples of what we call trust taxes that we pay. Now you might recognize some of this. You might be in organizations or teams that are going through this. You might even think of other examples of taxes that people pay. Okay, or teams of people pay. So as we look at those examples, that's something to think about is, what trust tax might you be experiencing in your team or organization today? Ask yourself that question. What trust tax might you be experiencing in your team or organization today? And Stephen M.R. Covey has got this to say about it. He says it is really the most overlooked, misunderstood, and underutilized asset of an organization. Amazing, isn't it? Trust, this whole idea of trust. It is really the most underutilized asset of organizations. So how do you go about building a high trust culture? So the second part we're talking about is this whole building a culture of trust or high trust. to build a high trust, let's talk about what is trust to begin with. It's about character and competence. Confidence is born out of character and competence of people and organization. Okay, and the opposite is suspicion. Okay, so when you talk about trust, there are generally 5 different areas. Okay, it starts with self, individual, then it talks about the relationship trust, then it talks trust as an organization. What kind of trust exists in the organization? Next level is the trust that a company has in the market, and the highest level, of course, is the societal trust, which is the kind of trust that society places on an organization. Are they what you call this organization that people trust outside, they do the right things. And a high trust culture is built on a foundation of credibility and behavior. 2 key areas: credibility and behavior. That's what builds, or at least the foundation of trust is about. And we use this metaphor of a tree. It talks about the character and the competence, okay, to build trust. And in this character and competence, you can break it down to 4 cores of credibility in trust. Okay, one is integrity, the other one is intent, third one is capabilities, and the fourth one is results. So these are the 4 cores of credibility that builds into character and competence of individuals and organizations. Okay? And guess what, folks? All of this can be built on. All this can be accelerated. And there are ways of accelerating it. Things like, how do you accelerate integrity? Keeping commitments, standing for something, being open. There are ways of doing it. So there are, formulas, so to speak, that you can apply to increase this. Okay, and sometimes if you want to just watch a humorous video on trust, we need to be clear on our intent, because if our intent is not right, it might be something like this.
And close your eyes and just fall down, okay? Don't worry.
Okay, then Lauren's gonna catch you.
Close your eyes. Okay.
Okay, it's called the trust fall. Okay, trust fall. Ready, set, go.
So a little humorous video on trust there, okay? But in essence, this is what we're talking about, okay? The character and competence, okay? And we talk about behavior in relationship trust. What are the behaviors in that? There are 13 specific behaviors we believe can help build a high trust culture. And the 13 behaviors are these: transparency, loyalty, delivering results, confront reality, listen first, keeping commitments. These are 13 behaviors that can help drive a high trust behavior. So like I said earlier, all this can be built upon. You can identify it and you can do things to accelerate this trust. And of course, the opposite also exists. Counterfeit behavior is what we call the opposite of a high trust organization. So what we want to do is move, perhaps, from this organization to this kind of, where at the top and the bottom are the same like this. So that's the second one. And the third one I talk about is this whole idea of a culture of execution. Okay, a culture of execution. Okay, in leading during a crisis. Okay, and when we talk about execution, we talk about 4 key areas. Okay, 4 key areas of execution. And when we talk about execution, we talk about the strategies leaders can have to execute. Okay, and they generally are broken up into 2, what we call the stroke of the pen and behavior change. Now, stroke of the pen, what is that? These are the easy things to do. These are the things that, with the right amount of resources, I can do immediately. I can have capital investment, I can buy media space, I can, expand stuff. That's the easy one. The more challenging one is the behavior change. It's the strategy of behavior change, where we talk about, trying to change our processes, improve customer experiences, and that's where the real execution challenge lies, in this area. Okay, and if you were to compare what goes on in an organization today, you've got 2. You've got your day-to-day job, what we call the whirlwind, and you've got what we call new activities, the goals. Okay, one is urgent, one is important. Okay, urgent acts on you, the important, you need to act on it. And the 4 areas that we talk about, the first one is to focus on the key goals, the wildly important. Okay, you narrow your focus here. Okay, and the simple formula, folks, is this: when you have a number of goals, when you have a small number of goals, the ability to achieve them with excellence may be the same. But as soon as your goals start growing, it becomes more difficult. And when it goes up to more than 11, guess what? You might not be able to even execute even on one with excellence. So the idea is to focus on a few things, and I like this saying that says, there will be always more good ideas than there is capacity to execute. And this quote from Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, which I think came out a couple of years ago, and he says Apple, and I remember Steve Jobs also saying the same thing. He says we are very good at saying no. Would you believe it? Because there are a lot of good ideas out there, and the ability to say no and to focus on really what is important is what makes Apple a good company or a great company. That's something we need to think about. That's what discipline one is all about. Focusing on the wildly important. Okay, is to take it out from the cloud and make it specific. Okay, second discipline is about acting on the lead measures. And what's the difference? A lag measure is the end result, measures the goal. A lead measure, on the other hand, measures what you need to do to get the goal. That's what a lead measures, and you need to focus on that. You need to act on that. These are usually predictable and influenceable. We like to use a simple analogy which a lot of people can relate to, is losing weight. The goal is that, but you don't focus on that. What you focus on is what you need to do to lose weight. So the goal is how it's defined, X to Y by when, and the lead measures are what you need to do, and that's what you focus on to move the goal. Okay. Third one is to keep a scoreboard. Okay, and it basically says that people play differently when they are keeping score, and the operative word is they, when they keep score. Okay, and it doesn't have to be a complicated scoreboard. It can be simple, visible, and has the right measurements of the lead and the lag measures. Okay, and it should be able to tell people immediately, like a football scoreboard, if they're winning or losing. Okay, and these are examples of of people who have done real scoreboards. Okay, and that's it. It can be as simple as that, but it's relevant to the people who are looking at it. And the last but not least is this whole idea of a cadence of accountability. How do you keep that cadence up, something that continues? Okay, and the idea of that is just to find out what are the most important things the individuals in the team can do to move that scoreboard in the following week. That's the idea of cadence of accountability. And in a week session or widely important goals session, this is what happens. You report on last week's commitments, review updates, scoreboard, and you make simple 3-step process. That, my friends, drives what we call this whole idea of execution. Okay, and then the next one I want to talk about is a culture of productivity. How do you drive productivity in an organization? And the whole paradox is this: in today's world, it is both easier and harder than ever to achieve extraordinary productivity. I don't know whether you'd agree with this statement or not. It is both easy as well as harder to achieve productivity in today's world. And this is what happens. And then tell me if you can relate to this little video that I'm going to show you. Okay, this thing called Buried Alive. A little fun video. Let's see if you can relate to this.
Today's workplace is a battlefield. As soon as you enter, you are fighting to survive an onslaught of urgent tasks, emails, meeting requests, and deadlines. It's like an avalanche of gravel that threatens to bury you alive. And just when you think you've dug yourself out, it starts all over again. And it's not just at work. The gravel threatens our personal lives as well, distracting us from key relationships and things that matter most. So we try to sort the gravel, label it, and organize it. We discuss it in meetings, often missing issues that are far more important. What extraordinary things could you achieve if only you could break out? Ready for a change?
Sorry, I think the video is lagging a bit, but I saw some reactions. Yeah, I take it many of you all can relate to that, or you at least found it humorous. Huh? But folks, that's the reality of the world, isn't it, today? And sometimes that's what it feels like. It feels like we are being swamped with what this thing called gravel in the world, real world is. Huh? Thanks for that feedback. Okay, so what is productivity actually? I can move my slide deck. That is, it is about focusing on the important. Okay, and generally people say, they do, hey, 60% of important things, but you know what, while it may look like a good, it's actually, can you imagine if we can take this 40% and push it up? Can you imagine how much more productive we are? Okay, and in fact, I honestly think that for most of us it might not even be 60-40, it might be much different from that. And the whole idea is the way we are wired. The way we are wired, when we are overloaded, things go into our what we call primitive brain, and we work on reflexes, instincts, and emotions. Okay, so the idea is to focus on things in our prefrontal cortex, where we plan, we have attention, we have self-control, and so forth. And this is what it's been. Okay, but then in the previous times and now, we're just bombarded with the amount of decisions we have to make. Our attention is under attack. Again, I don't know whether you all can relate to this. And then we have what we call an energy crisis. Okay, so the whole idea is, how do we get people to be more productive? Okay, more productive. Okay, we talked about effective individuals. Productivity is another area. Okay, we want to move them up that ladder. Okay, and the areas that we talk about is, how do we focus on acting on the important, going for what we call extraordinary, scheduling big rocks, meaning the things that are important. How do we manage this thing called our technology and not let it rule us, and keeping our energy up, which is fueling our fire. Okay, and if you talk, some of you may be familiar with these quadrants. This what we call the time matrix. We've got what is above the line, which is this line in the middle here are the important things, and the left is the urgent, the right is the not urgent. So we want to try as much as possible to push things in what we call the quadrant 2, which is the quadrant of effectiveness. Okay, where we get extraordinary productivity. Where do we get that time from? We try and find it from here, from quadrants 3 and 4, okay, to become. Now, what is this idea of these two the acronyms called PCD and ROM? Okay, let's look what PCD is and ROM. You might have heard of ROI, but this is slightly different. ROM. It's about pausing, clarifying, and deciding for everything that we do. Take time to pause, to clarify, and decide based on the 4 quadrants that I talked about, and then make a decision based on, hey, what gives me the greatest return on the moment? That's the ROM, as opposed to return on investment. But what at that moment, what is the greatest return I get? And you will see that as we move things towards quadrant 2, productivity goes up. Okay. And how can bosses help in this creating a quadrant 2 culture? Leaders can help define what is important, not important, on a consistent basis. Create a culture or an environment that is safe for things that are important to be done. Try and keep people out of quadrant 1, which is quadrant of crisis, and reward people for quadrant 2 behaviors. Okay, and create a culture of product. So that's what leaders can do in these challenging times, to act on these 5 key areas. Okay, so that's a little bit about productivity. Okay, and now I want to talk a little bit about creating a culture of sales leadership, because any organization, whether you're a profit or non-profit, in some way you are selling something to somebody. You're moving things across the board. How do you create a culture of that? And in this area, I'm just going to touch on one particular area, which is what we call intent, the whole idea of intent of people engaging with clients. It is a very, very important area. And very often, if we check our intent, we might find that perhaps it doesn't serve both parties well. It might just be serving one party. Okay, so we want to talk about this idea of intent counts more than technique. Okay, and intent really is your frame of reference. It's your mindset. It's why are you engaging with a client? And when I say client, folks, I mean both internal as well as external. So in theory, all of us have clients. You may not be in sales per se, but you may be having internal clients. So the intent that you have when you engage with your clients is of utmost importance. Okay, so we say, get clear about your intent, and you know what, folks, people can what do you call this, feel it. They can feel it. Okay, so you can't fake it. So you got to be clear about it. Make sure your intent serves the interests of both parties. Okay, and the paradox here is that you will be most successful when you concentrate on the success of others and not your own. That's the paradox of success, at least in sales. We always think about, hey, well, how can I be successful? But guess what? When I focus on the success of others, that's how I become successful. Last but not least is to visualize success. Feel it, hear it, visualize it. Okay. Now, question here. People will assign you an intent whether you want them to or not. How many of you all agree with the statement? Do you think people will assign you an intent whether you want them to or not? True, false? What do you all think? How many of you all say true? True, yes. Okay, so yes, absolutely. Whether you like it or not, your people are going to assign you an intent, right? Okay. And the intent they assign will have a significant impact on the quality of information. Again, true or false, you think? Depending on the intent, that is the quality. And when we talk about sales, getting good information is of paramount importance. Okay, so really, if we buy into the statement, folks, this whole idea of intent is very important. So we can't leave that up to chance. Okay, we need to be clear about our intent as we move forward in engaging with clients. Okay, so let me just share you this video. One of our thought leaders from Franklin Covey talking about intent, which counts more than.
People are unlikely to share their beliefs or trust your advice unless they trust your intent. Is the intent of your questions and recommendations to help them get what they want in a way they feel good about? Or is your intent to help you get what you want in a way you feel good about? People can sense this. When it comes to intent, most salespeople, rightly or wrongly, are judged guilty until proven innocent. And this couldn't be more true than at the beginning of the sales cycle, when you're calling on someone who doesn't even know you. If your intent serves the interests of your prospective client, as well as your own, you can act congruently with that intent. Trust will increase, mutual understanding will increase, and you will more often arrive at solutions that truly meet your prospective client's needs. Trust comes from confidence in and respect for the other person in the relationship. To create confidence and respect, you must see prospecting as developing meaningful relationships with people. Trust will follow. You can research and prepare so that your intent is in the best interest of both the prospective client and yourself. When you act congruently with sincere intent, it can set you free. Free to ask tough questions and speak truth to those in power. Free to remain authentic and loyal to what you value. Free to stay open to different opinions and beliefs.
I'm not seeing the video.
Free
Am
to
I the
not
only
take
one?
yourself so
Sorry, you haven't seen
seriously.
the video, is it?
To relax.
Yeah.
And have a ready sense of humor. But remember,
sorry about that, folks. Yeah, I think, hold on. Sorry about that. I think it froze for a while. Let me see if I can get it up again. Just give me a sec.
Because I saw your email.
Yeah, it was playing on my thing for a while. I think it must have frozen. Hold on a second. Yeah. Let me see if I can get that up again. Yes, sec, folks. Let me try this again. Sorry about that. Try sharing this again. Okay, can you all see my screen? Are y'all seeing my screen now, folks?
Yes,
Oh.
but.
Let me try this again, okay?
people are unlikely to share their beliefs or trust your advice. To create confidence and respect, you must see prospecting as developing meaningful relationships with people. Trust will follow. You can research and prepare so that your intent is in the best interest of both the prospective client and yourself. When you act congruently with sincere intent, it can set you free. Free to ask tough questions and speak truth to those in power. Free to remain authentic and loyal to what you value. Free to stay open to different opinions and beliefs. Free to not take yourself so seriously, to relax and have a ready sense of humor. But remember, if your intent is not crystal clear to you, it's likely not clear to your prospective client. There is a level at which we and our prospective clients share mutual interests. It's up to us to find and communicate it. If our prospective clients do not perceive they're getting a solution that meets their needs, our sincere intent allows them to choose to do nothing or go somewhere else to meet those needs. A no in this kind of environment is not necessarily rejection, and often leaves the door open to future positive interactions with prospective clients. As Jack Welch, former chairman and CEO of GE, has said, one thing we've discovered with certainty is that anything we do that makes the customer more successful inevitably results in a financial return for us.
Okay, my friends, very sorry about that little complications with the video. So before we end, I'm mindful of the time, and before I end my little talk here, I just wanted to just share some of those ideas with you in how you can drive leadership in these different areas amidst a crisis, in things in sales, leadership, in productivity, in execution, in trust. These are areas that we need to focus on when we talk about leading in what do you call this, in challenging times. So before I end for the day, are there any questions, any thoughts about what I shared from anybody? I did see a message now encouraging people to to interrupt me and ask questions.
There is a question from our audience.
Please go ahead.
Okay, how to adopt and adapt the toxic workplace culture?
Say that again, Naga. You broke up a little bit.
Oh, sorry. Okay, how to adopt and adapt the toxic workplace culture? Can you hear me?
Oh, right. Yes, I heard. Yes, that's a interesting and challenging question. How do we adopt and adapt? I think more perhaps adapt. We don't want to adopt toxic cultures. How do we adapt to toxic cultures? Okay, now that's a large question. I will just attempt to just give some insights. May not be the perfect answer, but some of the things. Okay, so using some of the things that we talked about, it just based on what I mentioned. Number one is that employee engagement. That model comes to mind. Okay, so how do we maybe perhaps in toxic cultures increase employee engagement? So going back to one of the areas, or what you call this mental maps that we shared earlier, that framework, the maturity continuum. I would suggest maybe getting people to adopt that, that culture, that mindset. Hey, we have a choice. Get people to understand that. So perhaps we understand them and share with them that idea that, hey, they have a choice, and maybe we can start changing them. Now that's a tough question. I'm not in any way implying that it's an overnight answer. You can solve it overnight, but I think these are ways that we can start. Number one. Number two, in fact, using almost all the things that I talked about. Trust. Sometimes toxic cultures, again, without knowing too much, can be a trust related issues. So, we talked about the 13 behaviors, high trust behaviors. We can start using those. How do we accelerate some trust? Perhaps that might start changing it. So I can just think of, top of my head, two areas that you might want to think about in trying to, address, Naga, what the question was in the so-called toxic behaviors. I hope that helps. I know, it's a large question and there may be many areas how we can, but again, top of my head, that can be two areas. Look at, how do we help individuals become effective? That might change their behaviors, their paradigms. And the other one is, how do we increase the trust level? That could be the starting point of maybe perhaps changing what we call toxic behaviors. But I do want to also add, as tough as that question is, you know what? We have seen people actually do it. It can be done. It's not impossible. Not easy, mind you. It takes a lot of work. You have to pay the price. There's a lot of work involved, but it can be done. We have seen organizations turn that big ship of of toxic behavior into high performing behavior. Thanks. Good question, Naga. I'm not sure who asked that question. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? I hope that helped a little bit.
Yeah, I answer one question. This is from me.
Yes, Naga.
Okay, I believe the organization is really important. The competency is really important. But how about the empathies? Do the leaders forget about the empathies to the employees? Because from the human resource field, From today's crisis, we know that we are facing an economically crisis, but the empathies and competency, we always focus on the competency to about profit only. But first of all, we have to think about the empowerment. If we don't have an empowerment, how can we get profits? So what about the empathies? How the leaders can show the empathies to the employees?
Absolutely, Naga. I think you hit the nail on the head, Naga. And just to be fair, I think both are important. I think results and performance all are important. Also, organizations exist for that. That one is a given. And I think from your question, I think that's not the issue. People are already doing that. And you say empathy, absolutely right. Now, in many, you talk about trust, and there's another one. Of course, we don't have enough time here today, but we talk about driving customer loyalty. That specifically talks about empathy. So empathy comes up in many of the solutions that I talked about. Yes, it's just that we didn't have time to go in deep into it, but empathy is certainly a part of that. You talk about, again, driving employee engagement. It starts with empathy. You have to have them to make that connection. So it both goes in together. You must have that empathy. You can't just go and like treat people like robots and say this is what you want, the results. It has to be balanced, Naga. Yes, they both come hand in hand. Empathy along with them. And the theory is that when you get that going, guess what? It gets a little bit easier to drive the results. When people, that engagement, back to that engagement model, when people are high up there, guess what? The results will come a little bit more natural. But it does start with empathy. You need to make that human, what we call the human connection. In another part of this whole enchilada of solutions, one of it talks about making that human connection. And you have to do that. So you're actually right, Naga. Both are crucially important. Good, brilliant question. Excellent. Anything else? Any other things that I can help with? I hope it's helping a bit at least. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? No, all good. Okay, I know I'm mindful. We are a few minutes past the hours. I just want to, Nanta, if everything is okay. Yes, Bibi, I do appreciate that. I know, it was an hour and I was deliberating. In fact, I was thinking of putting more stuff inside because I wanted to, give you all as much as possible. But I do appreciate it. It is a lot. It is a lot to listen. I think if I can summarize, yes, this whole idea of leading amidst a crisis, it is challenging. Let's be honest, it is challenging. This is not an easy, easy thing to deal with. Maybe I just want to, just by summary, say there is a lot of if you say like Phoebe, you say a lot of content to digest. Yes, there is a lot of that. It's how you use them. And in today's world, this whole idea of of balancing. And Naga talked about from the HR perspective. I think large organizations need to take a blended approach of how you disseminate that. So right now, of course, by way of just sharing with you, I'm maybe unloading a lot to you. But how do you take all this and space it out over journeys, what we call journeys for people to learn? Okay, so everything we talked about, this can be, a huge learning journey for different sets of people, depending on, where your role in the organization is. So that I think is the idea that, we should look at. And that's in my humble opinion, the organizations of the future, the learning organizations of the future, especially the larger ones, will need to look at that. How do you take all that and how do you space it out? How do you give different people different learning, experiences, and how do you continue that with those journeys? And how do you infuse that as they go along? That I think is the trick for organizations of the future. You're most welcome, Vivi. You're most welcome. My pleasure. I should thank you all for spending your hour listening to me. And like I said, I'm just the facilitator. All that stuff that I shared you, as much as it is, I know it's a lot, but all that stuff comes from from what you call this. I would say, leading authorities in their fields. They are leading authorities in their fields. So we put it together just to share that with you.
Okay, Mr. Patrick, there is one last question. If the management does not implement trust in the operation, how would the downline would be able to get the trust from the management?
Oh, Wow, another tough question on a Wednesday afternoon. If the management does not implement trust, what does the downline do? If I were to summarize that, okay, the famous challenge in life, like especially not my, it's that it's the manager or the, and sometimes that is a fact, okay. Sometimes if I were to just have a joke on a personal life, it's not my fault, it's my spouse's fault, But you know what? I always say again, using the 7 habits, one of our most powerful frameworks is this: do what you can do. That's what I would suggest. You can't change the world sometimes. You can't change the world, unfortunately. We can't solve all the world's problems, but we can make a change for ourselves. What is the right thing you should do? So if you think, hey, it is for me to help build trust, for me to help accelerate trust in any one of those, let's say 13 areas, that's what I should do. I should continue doing that. You never know. You never know what might happen. Management might change. Even if management doesn't change, this is my famous challenging line to Viva. It's the right thing to do. It develops you as an individual. So don't be so sometimes caught up with, hey, you know what? This is the situation. Don't worry. You do the right thing. You carry on. And that's why that framework we talked about, the maturity continuum, is very powerful. It talks about inside out. You start doing it. And you know what, folks? Very often you'd be surprised. Just by changing your behavior, you'd be surprised the kind of influence it might just have on others. So that's what I would encourage you to do. Don't worry about the outside problem yet. Just work on yourself. Work on what you can. Circle of influence. What can you do? Does that help? Whoever asked that question, I hope it helps a little bit. Lee, if it does help, I hope it does. But really, again, not my words. These are words from sages and gurus ahead of me, who I'm just taking and regurgitating. But that's what they say. That's what they say. Excellent, Lee. I'm happy to say that. Anything else? Anything else I can help with, or just share? All good? Okay, if everybody's okay, Naga, are we good to go? Shall we not hold anybody back any longer? If everybody's okay? Okay, with that folks, thank you very much. Let me just do one last thing. I just want to play this, show this slide up, and thank you all. These are my contact details. If you want to sign, and Hamida and Izzuddin are also on this call. Feel free to reach out to them. I'm not sure if you have their contact numbers. Feel free. If anything interests you, or you want to have a further discussion and ask about anything, send me something, or send Izzuddin or Hamida something. And then we will help in whichever way. Izzuddin has put his email address. Excellent. Okay, so just feel free if you can help. Happy to share and help. Excellent. Thank you very much, folks. I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to me, taking up your hour listening to me. And thank you for those questions. I really appreciate them. Brilliant questions. Excellent. Naga, thank you very much for organizing this. Okay, so with that, I will take leave. Naga, are we okay, Naga? Okay, folks, thank you very much. I will exit. Bye, everybody. Take care. Be safe. You're most welcome. Thank you very much for your time. I should thank you, actually, for sitting and listening to me. All the best. Be safe, everybody. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys, for organizing this.